Welcome back to Freight Waves Now, the final research quarter of 2023. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by Joe Antoshak. Joe, how's it going?
Hey, Tony, I'm doing well. How are you?
Can't complain. So, obviously, conflict happening in the Red Sea, causing a lot of disruptions, especially that Asia to Europe route that relies heavily on the Suez Canal. Kind of walk us through what's happening over there and what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so if somehow you're in the freight world and you haven't heard about it, sort of as spillover from the war in Israel, the Houthi rebels have started attacking container ships in the Red Sea. And that has led to a situation where major container lines are essentially diverting their ships from the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, and instead going around Africa via the Cape of Good Hope. And this is just a response to the violence, right? They don't want to put their people at risk. They don't want to put their cargo at risk. And we're also in an environment in the maritime world where rates have been pretty stubbornly low, right? There's been a lot of new building deliveries, a lot of capacity added there too, and so these container lines are looking for really any opportunity to increase their ton miles and put some upward pressure on rates. So that's kind of what we're seeing now. But it's a really very much a developing thing because just yesterday it was announced that the U.S. was going to lead kind of multinational military action to try to calm the Red Sea. But I mean, it's attacks happened yesterday. It's like it's over the next couple of weeks we're going to see how it plays out, whether or not this military intervention calms things, or if it God forbid, sort of escalates violence there, and it becomes an even longer thing. But yeah, it's very much in development, and is gonna play out over the next few weeks.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think one of the interesting things that goes along with this has been the development with the Panama Canal and the impacts that's had, because you've seen a lot of ships diverted to go through the Suez that were headed from, say, China to the U.S. via the East Coast. And this is going to impact them because the transit time is, what was it, 32% longer, I think, to go around the Cape of Good Hope than the Suez Canal. So, I mean, you're talking, a couple extra days in this case. So, but what you haven't necessarily seen, and we've got a chart here, it's our inbound ocean TEU volume index from China to the U.S. It's been fairly resilient. Like you mentioned, this is going to take some time to play out. But what it doesn't necessarily affect, and it might affect it from the spot rate perspective, right, where these ocean liners are trying to put upward pressure on spot rates globally. It might not impact the volume from China to the U.S. that's headed to the West Coast, right? Like that doesn't have any impact. It's not really impacted by that, but it could affect the East Coast import volumes in the months coming up. But we'll pull this chart up real quick before we move on and look at spot rates. But you you see a little bit of a slowdown in the last 2 weeks or so. But where we are in comparison, we're still above where we were last year. We're above where we were in 2019. And for much of November, we were above where we were in 2021. Yes, we want to see this moving up in the other direction, right? Starting to kind of pull ahead for Lunar New Year. But where it's at, I wouldn't say it's concerning just yet.
No, I agree. And it's, it is unusual to see in that chart, like volume ticking down right now. It's somewhat unseasonal. But it's not cause for panic or anything like that. But I do want to say too, just you bringing up the Panama Canal, that was a really great point, right? The situation there, low water levels, they've had to limit transit slots. So that means that, as you mentioned, a lot of ships have been diverted, to go through the Suez Canal, and then are now having to be diverted again. And right, that number. So Greg Miller wrote about it last week and had this great little couple of sentences here. The voyage between Shanghai and New York, 17% longer via the Suez Canal than the Panama Canal. and then it's 37% longer via the Cape of Good Hope than the Panama Canal. So we're talking, 40% longer journey for certain ships, and that's going to have a knock-on effect on rates for sure. The extent of that knock-on, effect, it's remains to be seen. But one of the, if not the biggest kind of story in global shipping and global supply chains right now.
Absolutely, and we'll throw up this spot rate chart real quick. You can see it hasn't necessarily had an impact yet, like you said, developing, but I would expect, look for China to that North America West Coast rate to increase. Why? Because if people aren't going to, from a shipper perspective, if you don't want to take a 40% longer journey, you're going to use the West Coast. If you don't have contracts, you're going to end up in the spot market. There's limited capacity. Carriers are going to try to artificially take capacity off the thing to boost those spot rates. So look for global spot rates on the ocean to increase because of this. But Joe, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's edition of the Research Corner. Right now we'll take a quick break, but we'll be back with more Freight Waves Now.